just a quick point. Ollie isn't in the studio today, so we'll be recording over Zoom, so just be aware of the audio when you're listening. But anyway, hello and welcome to Crossing the Line podcast. My name is Charlie Cullycutt, as ever, and with me via the wonders of the internet is my co-host and partner in crime, Oliver Rednall.
Hello. Sorry I can't be with you in mission control, Charlie. This is your ploy to nudge me out of the studio, isn't it?
To take over, yeah, that's what I'm doing, pretty much. But anyway, enough about us. Joining us today, we have not one, but two guests. They are founding members of the esteemed Cornley Polytechnic Theatre Society, but probably more favourably known as Mischief Theatre, and have been delighting our stages, screens and podcasts with their hilarious Olivier Award Winning shows, such as The Play That Goes Wrong, Comedy About a Bank Robbery, Groan Mischief Makers, and quite a few more. Harry Kershaw and Dave Hearn, thank you so much for coming on.
Hello.
There's the two of them. So, as I mentioned before, you are both founding members, if I'm correct, of Mischief Theatre?
That's right, yeah.
So, could you tell us how it all began?
Well, it all started with a dream, with Harry Kershaw's dream. No, it started with, it was with actually Henry Lewis back in 2007. Harry and I and Hen and a few other people did a foundation course at Lambda. And Hen wanted to basically kind of start an improv troupe because the guy who ran the foundation course, a guy called Adam Megiddo, was really into improv, and he founded Showstoppers and all of that amazing stuff that they do. And so he kind of got a group of people together who also liked improv. Maybe somewhat foolishly, we liked it. But we kind of performed together, doing really shows in the smallest possible way that you could imagine.
The first time where I was like, okay, well, we're a troupe, I think was when we went to Edinburgh and we did an improvisation show called Let's See What Happens. And reviewers and audience alike were united in the idea that what happened was not a very good show. Not a good show at all. I think in all if you added up all the stars we probably got 5 stars, but that might have been from sort of 5 different reviewers. So I remember,
done that and just put them like scattered about as the stars for your flyers.
Yeah,
really like an A3 poster, like combine them all into one.
Yeah, we stack them close together so you can't really see. It's just like a string of stars.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so what was your troupe called at the time?
Initially, we were called the Scat Pack, was the before Mischief. But you might, I don't know the nature of your podcast, you might want to cut this bit out, but it was originally based on the idea of improvisational jazz, which...
Isn't that kind of what improv is, though?
Yeah, well, that's the idea of scatting, obviously, in jazz terms, but obviously in more adult terms, it's fecal porn. So we quickly, well, no, not quickly. It should have been much quicker. We changed the name
over a long period. It wasn't until loads of people on social media who obviously were more into the scat porn part of scat that started following us on social media that really we thought we had to change. I wanted to call us Here All Week because we did sort of one-off shows in places. So I wanted us to end every show with us saying, thank you, we are here all week. We're not actually here all week, but we are here all week. And that was a really poor gag and got immediately dismissed. I think
shot down very quickly.
Pointed feet was another thing that we could have. I think that was up for serious discussion.
I deleted that from my brain.
What else was there? There was Dark Horse, maybe. I think that
Dark
was
Horse, Wild Card, all the kind of names you'd come up with in your early 20s.
Yeah.
Brilliant names, of course. Each and every one of them.
But we settled on Mischief.
Fair enough. And how did obviously the play that goes wrong was your first proper show that grew, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had so Mischief Movie Night, which is what we're kind of working on at the moment, started life as a show called Let's See What Happens, and then it evolved into Lights Camera Improvise, and it's essentially the same format. But we developed this improv show over like 5 or 6 years, and then the guys had written like a 50-minute scripted piece, which was The Play That Goes Wrong. So that was the kind of first, I guess you could argue, like definitely the first commercially successful piece from Mischief. But yeah, we've been going for about 5-6 years before that was even written, sort of plying our craft in various pub venues to small but appreciative houses.
Yeah. When there's the classic cliche line of "you're an overnight success," it very much was not that.
No, not at all. I'd say like this idea that we sort of came out of nowhere and sort of rocketed up through the ranks is a very romantic idea, but sadly not true. The rise to success after Play That Goes Wrong was pretty quick, but it always followed the kind of next logical progression, going from a pub venue to an off West End venue to a touring venue to the West End and then to Broadway and kind of onwards. But I think we never kind of congratulate ourselves for that, because it took Kenny Wax, the producer, and Mark Bentley to take a huge risk on a show that they'd never heard of with a bunch of people they'd never met. And so we were incredibly lucky. But where we did work really hard was trying to kind of capitalize on the momentum that we had.
But before that, I mean, I remember doing shows where there were more people on stage than in the audience. And there's a weird thing that happens when there are so few people in the audience that you have to go out and ask them beforehand if they really want to see the show. And there's a really weird thing that happens there, because what you really want is them to go, yeah, absolutely. But what they tend to do is we go out and ask them if they want to see the show, and they go, yeah. Yeah,
it starts to feel like it's more for us than it is for the audience.
It's the British public's way of being polite, but not really committing.
If you want to do it.
Those people now are going, well, I was at one of their first shows. So, look at me.
Yeah.
And was it from these shows or your improv shows that the Cornley Polytechnic Theatre Society arose? Or was that just a thing that was written into one of the plays?
It was written into Play That Goes Wrong. The boys came up, the guys who wrote it kind of came up with the idea of an amateur dramatic society based on various different societies that we know of. And then the name, Cornley, was just kind of made up because it sounds like a real place. But yeah, the characters, there's a lot of jokes in the Goes Wrong show and a few other bits that are kind of taken from improv, from some of our live shows. But yeah, the actual crafting of those clowns was kind of done separately in the rehearsal room.
And so did you get much say on your characters? Because I know, Dave, your character, for instance, is the kind of hopeless romantic who is not too successful, and then over the course of the shows eventually gets engaged and is very exciting.
He does, yes. Yeah. That kind of came out of... so this is where like the writers, the three boys, should be given a huge amount of credit, because they'd written a few bits in, but a lot of the characters kind of weren't fleshed out. They were there to kind of serve the jokes. And so actually I worked quite hard with the director to kind of come up with a more naive clown with Mark, the director. And he basically kind of pushed me into this more like this kind of bizarre clown where he kind of breaks the fourth wall and engages more with the audience. And it just added a really desperately needed dynamic to the show. So you don't have everyone just kind of stiff and like, this is not a white knuckle ride for everyone. It's actually, this character's quite enjoying it. And so a lot of the stuff for Max actually originally isn't in the script, particularly the stuff engaging with the audience, clapping and bowing and all that sort of stuff. And actually I was given a lot of free rein, particularly on the tour and in the West End, just to kind of improvise and encouraged actually to go too far and do too much, so that we know kind of what's wrong, and then we can pull it back. So some of those audiences got a real full throttle show of me just going mad. But yeah, we all kind of try and develop the parts and add in jokes where we think they're appropriate, and ultimately the writers kind of get to decide what they want to keep and what they want to cut.
Harry, did you have a character that was kind of originally conceived?
I think I originally was going to play Max.
That's right, yeah.
And then
you got a fantastic job.
I got another job. which was One Man, Two Governors in the West End.
I actually saw you in that. That was the first time I saw you with Rufus Hound.
Yes, with Rufus Hound.
Very, very, very funny.
Thank goodness you said that, because otherwise it would have been really awkward.
It was.
I saw you in it, and it was terrible.
Completely forgettable.
One star. But
so that was really fun. And then so I went away to do that, and thinking, that the play that goes wrong is going to be or as it was at the time, The Murder Before Christmas, I think was what it was called originally. I was thinking, that's going to be really good, and I never thought when it was happening above a pub that it would then turn into what it turned into, which was obviously a massive show that went on tour into the West End and to Broadway and now is around the world. At the time, I was like, well, One Man, Two Governors, that's definitely a safer bet. Turns out not to have been a safer bet at all.
By doing that, do you feel that you missed out a little bit in that sense?
No. I still very much enjoy being in Mischief shows. So I played the Chris Bean part quite often. After Henry Shields, who plays it originally, is gone. And there's something lovely about that, because you go in knowing that unless you screw it up, it's a great part. And that's a really fun thing to do as well. And I was going to go in, and before COVID hit, I was going to go in and play the Mind Mangler in Magic Goes Wrong. So it's a sort of different perspective on it. You get to see the show as it is at the start, and then you get to see the experience of a new cast coming in, which is also great.
Fair enough.
And when you're developing a new show, for example, like the Peter Pan or the Magic one, how do you decide on what subject you're going to do? Or whether you go, we've got these different ideas, maybe we've got 3 ideas, but we're actually going to set and we're going to run with this one?
Well, that would probably be, in terms of like the kind of goes wrong stuff, the writers sort of sit down and have a chat about what they want and come up with a sort of rough blueprint. And the more experience they've kind of got as writers, the more sort of finished the scripts are and the less work there is to do in terms of additional material. But there have been calls for a magic show for quite a while, just because it's such a ripe medium for parody. But we were kind of tipped over the edge when Penn and Teller came to see Bank Robbery, and it was Penn that contacted us and said, I really want to work with you guys, I'd love to create a show. And the boys have been thinking about doing a magic show going wrong for a couple of years, and we're like, well, we've got this kind of rough outline of a script. And actually when we did a Mischief movie night tour about 2 years ago, we added, because it was only 1 act, so some venues required us to have 2 acts, so we did a kind of special 20-minute sort of secret show for the people who were watching Mischief movie night. And that 20 minutes by the end of the 6-week tour turned into about an hour, because we just kept coming in every day and just adding more jokes and adding material and coming up with new stuff. And so it was kind of developed, and that script is now completely different to what the final product was. But it was just kind of having a sample audience to go through stuff was really amazing. So it's kind of just basically subjects where you just kind of go, what can we take the piss out of? Like a bank robbery is just a really high stakes situation. How do we make it silly? And so it's it's just thinking about those kind of things that people want to watch, and then basically just chuck in a couple of people falling over. You've got a Mischief show.
Some of the scenery at the end.
Yeah.
Are there any shows that have gone that you wanted to put into production that haven't come to sort of fruition yet, or that might do so in the future?
I don't think so. We had a very short run. I wasn't in it. Did you do Nativity, Harry?
No, I didn't do Nativity, but I saw a video of it,
and it was very good.
It was great.
It was excellent.
Yeah, the guys were.
Was that a Reading rep? I think.
Yeah, it was at Reading, and they did. Some of the Mischief guys were in it. It was like a stage show of Nativity, and we borrowed / stole some of the stuff for the BBC special we did. But yeah, we're kind of pretty lucky in that the producers are sort of behind us on most of the things that we want to produce, subject to like workshops and stuff. But we were hoping to do a 3-show season last year when we were going to do Grown Ups, then Magic, and then a third show, which was TVC. But obviously when the pandemic hit and Magic extended, it all just kind of got a bit messy. And so we're still working on that third show, but it's in truth, we're not entirely sure what it is. So there's no inside scoop, sadly, because we don't even know.
So when you say you're working on it, then does it start off as an improvisation that might have come from your lights, camera, improv, or?
No, it tends to be the guys will kind of get together and put pen to paper and kind of come up with something. And like I said, even with Magic, like even if it's just 10, 12 pages, it will often evolve into something completely different to what it started as. And so a lot of that is improv, but we tend to, with scripted stuff, we tend to have a starting point. I think it's, it's really important just to kind of know what you're trying to do and basically the style that you're going for. Otherwise, you sort of end up in a real no man's land pretty quickly.
Obviously, when you're rehearsing, you mentioned that your background was in improv, but then Henry, and David, I want to say
Henry, Jono.
John. Apologies, John.
He's very forgettable.
The smallest physically
of the three. That must be it. The sheer height. If you have the picture, it's a bit like the Monsters Inc. thing where like the sticker is just over the top of it. So if the three of them are writing, but obviously your background is in improv, how does that work when you're rehearsing something that is as chaotic as a goes wrong show?
Well, Harry, how do you find it? Because you've come in a few times after.
Well, it seems to me that there are two sort of different sections to any goes wrong show that's on stage, and one of those sections is very tightly choreographed, and if you stand in the wrong place, then you might end up getting hit by someone or something. So in that sense, it's almost like a ballet. Some of those things, and then there are other sections which are lackeys. So moments where we've got an idea script-wise what might happen, but the audience reaction to it will change what it is. So, for example, in Peter Pan Goes Wrong, Chris Bean as Captain Hook tries to open a bottle, but he's wearing a hook and he's holding the bottle with his other hand, so hilarity ensues. What happens during that moment is really different depending on how the audience react. If the audience don't react in any way, then we're kind of screwed. If they react in a different way, then that's really fun. But I've got to say, I was, before COVID hit, rehearsing the Mind Mangler, who is a magician, who is a sort of mentalist, mind reader type character in Magic Goes Wrong. Rehearsing that is bizarre because you've got a script, but it's really just a framework for what might happen. And no matter how many times you ask someone in a rehearsal room what they do for a living, you know that they're not a retired bookseller. You know that's not what they are. But you spend most of rehearsal being like, so what do you do for a living? Or and talking to an audience member, which is actually just the director or another cast member who is humouring you, which is a very weird way to rehearse something, because even though you're rehearsing it, there is no substitute for just doing it in front of an audience. As
you were saying, you were rehearsing for the Mind Mangler. When you've got something like Magic, which is very, carefully choreographed so that you're not looking at the thing that's happening, how do you mix that with what you're doing, which is exactly like you said, this is a loose part and we're going to go with how the audience reacts?
I suppose you've just got to really listen really very hard, because what you could do is the thing that you want to do because you know that maybe it's worked previously. But every audience is different, and what one audience like, another audience might not like. So by really listening to what actually is there, then you can sort of cater every show to a specific audience, which I think is what makes them so much fun to do, these shows, because it doesn't feel like you're just repeating the same thing. It feels like every night is a different show, which is a really fun thing to be part of.
Did you Do you notice a difference between the audience reaction when you went to Broadway to what you'd done previously?
Well, I should take that one because Harry didn't come very sadly, but it was a good choice in my opinion. It would have been a nightmare.
He says,
"Thank you."
His hair.
Yeah. Broadway was really different. I think basically, I think to sum up the two kind of main attitudes, I think in America you have this idea that something is brilliant, and if you take they're both brilliant in both countries, right? The Americans go, "This is amazing, this is brilliant, I cannot wait to see this," and British people go, "I've heard this is really amazing and really brilliant, it better be good." And so it's like this. The Americans are much more engaged and on the front foot, particularly with theatre, much more vocal, not afraid to kind of shout out, not afraid to laugh and really let themselves go. That's where I find a British audience needs much more winning over, particularly in London. And I think it's because Broadway feels quite sacred when you're out there. Like there's this real like vibe, particularly in the crew and stuff backstage. And the front of house, they take real pride in the kind of service they're providing to the public, and the actors take real pride in the kind of work that they're creating. So you end up having this just absolutely insane atmosphere, particularly on Friday, Saturday nights. And I remember when we did our dress run for play, and by the time we finished Broadway, we'd done probably over, not on Broadway, but in total of The Play That Goes Wrong, over 1,000 shows. So I've done Play That Goes Wrong in every permutation of the script, every cut, edit, everything you can imagine, we've all done it. And so we got to our dress run, and the company manager came around and was like, "You guys really excited for the dress run?" And we were like, yeah, be fine, just going to perform it to no one, and you guys will go, "Yeah, that went well, and we'll open tomorrow and it'll be fine." And he sort of joked and went, "We're completely sold out." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he was just like, every seat is full. And so we went out, and basically what happens is on the dress run, every other show in Broadway comes to see your show. And so we had like the cast of Cirque du Soleil, Hamilton, Dear Evan Hansen, 900 seats completely full, bottom to top. And they went absolutely ballistic. And so like Henry Shields just stepped out to do the opening speech, and this just roar of laughter came out, and this massive applause. And we were all backstage, and it was just like one of the best shows I've ever done, because they were just like screaming and shouting, and they were having a great time. But because they're actors as well, they kind of knew that we need you to shut up sometimes so that we can set up the next joke. So they were kind of the perfect audience. You weren't having to control them, but they laughed when we wanted them to. And so after a while, you kind of key into that sort of American way of being. And sometimes you do just have to shout over them and tell them to shut up, because you're like, you're gonna miss the next bit.
It's like, it's not that funny,
like,
guys.
Chill
Calm
out.
down.
But yeah, we kind of learned as well, like you sort of learn the audience science of, and this happens in the UK, like sometimes on a Friday night, for example, when everyone's had a couple of drinks and they're really excited, you actually spend the first 10 minutes of the show really slowing everything down. So as you get like the peak of this laughter, what you want to do is kind of land the next punchline at the peak so that it never drops, and the audience are constantly just like laughing, and this comes in these really quick waves. But actually with those shows, when you have an audience, because we front loaded the show with a lot of jokes, but you kind of end up having to slow it down a lot, because you're going, we know that in about 20 minutes you're all going to get knackered, and then the last 20 minutes of the show is going to be played to complete silence because you're too tired to laugh anymore. And so what you end up doing is actually letting all of the laughs in the first 20 minutes completely die before you set up the next joke. And you just slow the rhythm right down to give the audience, it's kind of weird. You sort of go, we know what's best for you. You're going to get knackered in a minute. So we're just like pacing you through it. And then when you get to the second act, you just hit the gas all the way to the end. And so it's, we found we were doing that on Broadway a lot more, just to give people an easier ride, because we found that actually ending the show on that, you talk to audiences afterwards and you go, I felt like it went really bad towards the end, and people were just like, no, I just ran out of laughs, I just had no more to give. And you're just like, oh, that's an amazing thing to hear, but it just meant that like, oh, we don't want you to leave being like, oh, that was great, but I'm very tired now. You kind of want people to leave energized.
It's one of the weird things. Sometimes when you're like, I think that was one of the best shows that we've done in a while. You quite often have that feel. Well, hopefully you have that feeling sometimes. And by the end of the show, you're kind of expecting a big applause because it's gone really well and people have laughed a lot. But actually, they can't be bothered by the end. They're just like, well, the round of applause is not what we expected, because we sort of showed you that we enjoyed the show. So by the end,
say instead, the round of
leave.
applause has been throughout the show.
Yeah.
I think as well, a big difference is in the UK, if you get a standing ovation, that's really special. If you don't get a standing ovation on Broadway, that's like, that never happens. Even if you do, like, we've done terrible shows where we're like, oh, we really weren't on form, but they're up on their feet at the end of it. And like, they just love it. They just love it out there and they're unafraid to show it.
But the science of that is really interesting, I think. Like the science of the shows where you'll get a standing ovation in London, I don't think it makes any sense. I'm the kind of person who I find standing up for some reason in a theatre, I find it very embarrassing. So I will not stand up at the end of a show unless I really have to. And I feel like that's the sort of British way. It's just like, we're not going to stand up unless we really have to. We're going to stay sitting.
I have the same thing where unless everybody around me is stood up and I can no longer see the stage, I'm like, no, I'm not standing up for them.
Yeah.
Did you ever have the thing where they were standing up and applauding before you'd even begun? Because I know on Broadway I saw Al Pacino in something and he came on and the entire audience goes wild, and I'm thinking to myself, this is probably the British attitude of, he's not done anything yet.
We had that a lot when we went to see different shows. Obviously, as much as I would love to tell you a story of when that happened to us, sadly it did not. I think we were not famous enough. We hadn't achieved the upper echelons that Broadway requires. But I think I spoke to loads of other actors in other companies and stuff, with like Hamilton and Sunset Boulevard, and Glenn Close was in Sunset Boulevard when we were there, and the director of that had plotted in a moment for the directors plot in applause moments for famous people, because they know as soon as they walk out, they're just going to get around. And if you can figure out a clever way of doing it, then the whole show stops, and the actor sometimes has to fully break character to be like, stop, I need to go back to doing some acting.
It must be so jarring.
Yeah, it's very, very strange. And I think with Sunset Boulevard, when I saw that, they gave Glenn Close this amazing entrance on this big catwalk, and she came out and then music started, everyone on their feet, everyone applauding, and she just had to walk down this catwalk and go all the way down these stairs, and then by the time she got to the bottom, she started the song and the applause had died down. So it kind of felt like it was part of the show, and that was a really clever way of doing it. Sometimes literally someone comes through a door and it's just like, hey, and then it's just like, bah, and everyone goes mental, and you have to stop. So but I think that's a kind of testament to their love and their attitude towards theatre.
So, obviously, you went over to Broadway, and that was because J.J. Abrams got on board with the show. How did that happen? Was he just a fan of comedy? And
he likes comedy, particularly likes magic as well. And so he's just a massive nerd, really. But he was filming the first of the newer ones, so the 7th Star Wars movie in London. And I think Harrison Ford had come to see the show a couple of days before, and JJ had a day off from filming and was just in Hyde Park. I think he just Googled plays to see in London, and Play That Goes Wrong, thanks to our marketing team, came up pretty high on the list. So he booked a ticket, he came, and to be honest, I didn't really know who he was, and a few people in the cast, not many people did, but our producer came round and was very excited, and this lovely American man came backstage and was like, well done. And we were like, yeah, cheers, mate. See you later. And then
whatever, mate, go back to Star Wars. We've got a show to do.
It's like, who's this guy? And so we'd been kind of talking with an American producer for about a year or two. And the difficult thing about getting a show to Broadway is just finding a theatre that's available. And raising the money actually isn't too difficult because there are so many investors that want to kind of get behind the arts. But yeah, once JJ kind of fully threw his weight behind it, suddenly theatres were available. And
Weird.
that kind of really helped us. And he was amazing. He kind of sat, so he'd never done a theatre show before, and so we had a 10-day tech when we got there, because obviously we knew the show inside out, and so it was for the crew and stuff. And he just sat in the theatre for 10 days and just watched us do he watched a tech for 10 days, and occasionally asked a few questions and came up with a few ideas and stuff. And there was a point where we were like, are we being directed by J.J. Abrams? But then there was obviously he was very humble as well. He was like, have you thought about doing this and trying this? And we were just like, yeah, JJ, we did that like 2 years ago, and there's a reason
so
that's not
2
in.
years ago, JJ.
Yeah, so like there's a reason that's cut, mate. So just
simmer down.
Yeah. Cool your boots, JJ. And yeah, and he was really great, and he was there at the press night, took us all out for dinner, for drinks and stuff, and he went on various chat shows on like Stephen Colbert and loads of other stuff, and Jimmy Fallon, and we did a whole kind of the boys did a whole sketch with him and stuff, and so he really got stuck in and involved, and he's really, I think the higher you get up that kind of Hollywood ladder, you sort of realize the nicer people get, and actually like nice guys don't finish last. Like everyone near the top is just really kind, really intelligent, extremely charming and charismatic, and just really lovely people to work with. And
I imagine absolutely like bleed film, theatre, TV, like it's their livelihoods. They know everything about it.
Yeah, he knows a huge amount, and is so interested in so many different things. And I was in the last Star Wars with him actually. Came and played a stormtrooper and had a couple of lines, and I actually got to watch him just like directing Star Wars. And I messaged him afterwards just saying, look, this is going to sound really gushy, and I don't mean to like blow smoke up your ass, but I was genuinely so impressed by the immense amount of pressure he must have been under filming the last Star Wars film of that kind of saga, and the way that he conducted himself, even in moments when I saw him becoming stressed, was amazing. He just never lost it once. Everyone was constantly having a good time. He was constantly having to adapt and change what he wanted to do based on different different things in the environment. And yeah, it was just a real privilege to watch, because I was like, oh, that job I really couldn't do that well. I would just be an absolute car crash on day one. So I was very impressed, and I'm sure he wants to hear that from me.
Yeah.
Well, if you could just pass us his details, we'll send him these clips, and then we'll just put in do you fancy coming on and talking to us about
Pop it on, yeah.
About film directing. So obviously we've been talking about J.J. Abrams there for a bit, but you have been quite big with the celebrities who've come and watched you, and in fact on your posters for selling the show, one of the things I noticed when I came and saw, I think it was your first birthday, which Harry, you were in, someone got set on fire right at the end.
Yes,
which was entertaining. Was that you who got set on fire?
No, no. Well, they asked me if I wanted to get set on fire, and Matt Cavendish, who did get set on fire, wasn't in at that point. And I said, no, Matt has asked that he gets set on fire. So it was Matt.
Well, one of the things you notice is the Tom Cruise on the poster. Has he ever been involved in the show at all? Did you ever manage to get him in for a cameo?
No, we contacted him several times, but alas, no dice.
Not interested.
Although he did come and see the show. He saw it about a year ago maybe. And
that was the problem. Came to see the show, then definitely didn't want to be involved.
Yeah, 100%. Got out of there. But no, apparently he liked it very much, and then left swiftly and politely.
Didn't say anything at the end of it. Let's go. Well, the name of the show is obviously Goes Wrong. And with something as crazy as your shows, I have to wonder, has anything actually gone wrong?
Oh, yes. All the time. All the time.
And let's preface this with, it's very safe now. It's very safe.
This is the disclaimer we have to say before we talk about this part.
But
this podcast is dedicated to the living memory of so-and-so and so-and-so.
It comes up through the top.
Yeah. It's like 200 names just go rolling up.
Well, Harry, why don't you tell? You've had some very amusing accidents.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the weirdest ones was we were just hanging out in the dressing room during the interval, and one of the other actors got overexcited and smashed a light fitting, and and it came, all the glass came down and cut me, and so I had to go to A&E halfway through the show, and someone else had to play. In fact, the person who glassed me then had to play the part that I was playing, and they switched it around. But because obviously it's a goes wrong show, I think people just thought, well, cast is switching around. That's a normal thing. We also had, in Pan Goes Wrong, we also had problems with the hook. At some point that smashed into someone, and they started bleeding profusely. Yes, yeah. But it's all very safe. Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, I suppose here's the worst thing that's happened to me, which was there's, in Peter Pan Goes Wrong, there's a moment where Mr. Darling is in the nursery with the children, and he's talking to them, and it's great. And then his tie gets trapped around his neck, so he can't breathe. And then there are some blunted scissors that he gets from one of the drawers, and he goes like that, and it's actually on a pulley system, so the tie comes off and everything's fine. I got overexcited one night, and the scissors weren't blunted, and I went like that to get the tie off, and I actually something wasn't quite right, but I got the tie off, everything was fine. The first scene is about 15 minutes maybe, and I walked to the front of the stage, and I just went like that, and there was blood pouring from the back of my neck, and I was like, this isn't right. And there was just a moment of me going, okay, right, and then just carrying on. Then at the end of the scene, Mr. Darling turns in order to get out of a door that won't open or close properly, and there was a massive, massive laugh from the audience. I was like, well, obviously that's gone well. They've loved that. I got out of the door, and then I looked at a mirror, which is right by the stage, and I'm wearing a white shirt with a white waistcoat, and blood had seeped through the entire back of my shirt and waistcoat. So the entire back of me was completely covered in blood. I don't know what joke the audience thought was happening at that point, but they found it very funny. I don't know what joke they thought it was. But yeah, but it's very safe.
Very, very safe.
It is now.
Yeah, it is now.
Yeah.
It is now. Yeah.
Well, we tend to find that, like, the first couple of casts that go through, so in Mischief, we kind of never ask anything of other actors that we wouldn't do ourselves. So we often find that, like, if we're doing particularly play and magic, and less so Pan, because you guys kind of took that over a bit sooner, but yeah, we tend to just make sure that if one of us can do it, then somebody else can. So it's that thing of going, yeah, this bit is maybe a bit risky or a bit dangerous. Here are the mitigations in place. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, then that's absolutely fine. But it's the small stuff that gets you. It's like the big tricks and stuff are kind of sort of regulated down to the last millimeter. But it's the small stuff. It's the slips. It's dropping stuff, losing props, handing stuff over. I dislocated my shoulder during one show and had to go to hospital to get that put back in.
How did you manage that?
It's during a play that goes wrong. I did it twice actually, but
lazy work.
Just couldn't be bothered.
I just wanted to go home early.
Yeah, had enough. But yeah, I was holding up the picture with the clock and the barometer scene where we're all holding stuff on the walls. And my arm was like full extension holding the picture, and the picture started to rotate and slip, and it was heading towards Hen's head. And so I tried to stop it, but my hand rotated, my elbow rotated, my shoulder rotated, and then it popped out. And so I left the stage. And then the understudy came on, and yeah, again, everyone kind of thought it was all part of it. And then I did it once at the Trafalgar Studios when we were doing just a 50-minute show. I got thrown over in a fight. I get thrown over the chaise longue, and I landed on a pillow, and the pillow, my shoulder stopped, but the pillow in my arm kept going. And I went straight off to hospital, and they kind of finished the show without me. And the audience refused to leave because they thought it was all part of the show. So like one of the actors had to come out and be like, the show has actually ended now. Dave isn't here to take the bow with everyone because he is in hospital, and everyone kind of laughed, and they were like, no, like, could you please leave because we want to go and see him. So yeah, it's stuff does happen, and it's kind of weird. Like, I think Harry's right. Like, the annoying thing is you never know what's going wrong until you discover it. So there's like a whole book of contingencies in every show, just like another Bible of, if this happens, then do this and do this. All the actors have to learn all of the contingencies, and those are usually improvised on the spot, and then we kind of settle on them.
How far can people go before the audience knows that this is no longer part of the play?
Well, I think during the first tour of Peter Pan Goes Wrong, one of the actors just became really ill. I think five minutes into maybe like the second show that we'd done, just became really ill and just said, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm feeling really ill. This isn't part of the show, and then walked off. We didn't have, the understudy at that point hadn't really learned the show. And so we could either stop the show or carry on. And, I think the whole ethos is just that you carry on. So me and Lawrence Piers went out and did a half-hour, very poor magic show. Very poor. It was improvised and just, I imagine, not fun if you were an audience member. And they spent half an hour just taking the understudy through the situation. And the understudy then did the rest of the show. And those moments where no one's hurt, but something's gone wrong, they're some of the weirdest.
Yeah, they're very strange. The show covers. I remember in Grown Ups, I don't know which version of it you saw, but there was a version where we had to do a quick, like a set change between Act 1 and Act 2. And as we were getting closer and closer to the show, the kind of tech wasn't quite in place, and we didn't quite have time to rehearse certain things. And so the director came up to me and Bri, who were playing smaller characters, and just said, look, we need you to cover the set change whilst they practice it throughout the next couple of shows. And I was like, okay, how long do you need? And she was like, the fastest we've run it is about 2.5 minutes. So we need 2 to 3 minutes. So I was like, 2 to 3 minutes of just material. And she was just like, yeah. And so me and Bri
goes go.
Yeah, and it was crazy. So me and Bri at the 5, literally at the top of the show, just wrote like a load of jokes. And then over 2 weeks it took till we could get this thing in place. And so every show for 2 weeks, we went out and improvised a 2 to 4 minute stand-up routine with no real knowledge of when it would end, if it would ever end, and what was going on behind the curtain, to just a very bewildered audience. But we learned a lot about that.
The show stops are great. You learn so much more from a show stop moment that's improvised that doesn't work from one that does. So during one of the show stops, because there are show stops sometimes, one of the people in the play that goes wrong when I was doing it had come up with this idea, and he was really excited about it. And he told me what it was, and I was like, I don't think you should do that. And he was like, no, it's brilliant. And I was like, okay, fine. The way that the show stops work quite often is that Chris Bean will go out and sort of talk a bit, and then someone will be behind the curtain. And they'll let you know they're there, and then you'll introduce them, and they'll do whatever they do, and that's kind of quite a fun thing. And so this person walked on stage, and their idea was that they would do like a magic trick. They'd come on with a spoon, and they would try and bend the spoon, like in a Uri Geller style way. And the joke they had come up with was that the spoon didn't bend, but the spoon ended up bending him. And that was the joke that he'd come up with. And he didn't explain this at all. He just came on. And I went, okay, yeah, absolutely. Introducing Jonathan. Jonathan came on, and he didn't say anything. He didn't give any form of anything about it. He just took out the spoon, and then he pretended that the spoon was bending him without any introduction or anything. And the audience, I think it's fair to say, were bemused. They didn't know what was going on. And by the end of this segment, he was just lying on the stage as if the spoon had bent him. And there was no applause, no nothing. I've never seen anyone kill an audience dead in that way. And so I just got out and went, okay, well, that was very weird. Thank you, Jonathan. And that was the end of that.
Don't come again.
But those moments that didn't go right. They end up being some of the funnest memories that you've got sometimes.
I wasn't even there, and I'm cringing like crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there are any people listening or watching who have got their own theatre company or group and want to put things together and put their own shows on, what sort of advice would you give them? Because it is that, you know, being especially early on in a career, about creating your own work is a massive part of it. What advice would you do to steer them in the right direction?
Do you want to go first, Harry?
Sure, yeah, and I'll go first. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very polite of you.
I would say,
unless you'd like me to go first, of course.
No, sorry. Now I've got something. It's great.
Right.
I was just stalling for 5 seconds. And I would say, do work that you enjoy. So you can make something you can try and make something universal. But I think a better idea is to, if you're doing a comedy, do something that makes you laugh, for example. You can do something that you hope will be successful, but actually, what's the point in doing that? Because if it is successful, then you've created a successful thing that you don't enjoy doing. And if it's not, then you've just wasted your time entirely. I think that's just a really important thing. Just create something that you'd like to watch, because so many people will give you reasons why you can't do something. I think that's a normal thing, is just, well, you can't do that because of this. But the reality is, those people who are telling you that you can't do the thing haven't done that thing themselves. So just do what you like, and don't let the fact that people are telling you that it's impossible get in your way.
Very good advice. Very sage. Yeah.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Right, now, your turn.
Go on, Dave.
Top that then.
All right, I'll see what I can do. So I would say I kind of have like, I suppose 2 things really. The first one is just to become familiar with failure. And I don't mean that in a kind of pessimistic, oh, you're going to fail a lot, get used to it, kid, kind of way. It's more that, like, especially when you're doing comedy, like literally line by line, joke by joke, you're going to, 9 times out of 10, you're going to come up with something that isn't funny or doesn't work. And it's about embracing that and understanding that that's part of the process of learning how to make something better. And I think the ideology of a kind of our society is that we mustn't fail, that we must succeed all the time, and that winning is good. And actually, I think that's wrong. I think the opposite is true. I think you become better by learning what's wrong. We know what's right by learning what's wrong. And I think that's how all of our shows are built, particularly in the previews of all of our stage shows. You have 6 weeks or 4 weeks previews where you go out and you deliver jokes that just don't work. And that's good, because it means you can take them out of the show or write better jokes. It's horrible as an actor to deliver a punchline to a silent house, but like it's engaging with that idea and becoming familiar and actually enjoying those failures and going, great, it's good that this doesn't work, and because you're always going to come up with great stuff that does work. And so actually by learning by failing is really good. And the second thing is, I think, is understanding that you're going into an industry that you have very little control over. So I think individuals, actors, people who make podcasts, people who sing and dance and all that kind of stuff can become very, very demoralized and become very frustrated with the system. But the fact is that you have to work really, really hard, and that just should be your baseline. But at the end of the day, like, the play that goes wrong would not have been anything had Kenny Wax and Mark Bentley not come along to see the show, like, and go, oh, we're going to put loads of money behind this and take a massive risk on these people. If they hadn't come to see the show, we wouldn't be talking now. And like, we worked really hard, we got the show on, we perfected it, we failed a lot, we made it better, but actually there was an element of luck that was completely out of our control. And I think the second you go into a casting room or an audition, all you can do is the best. The only thing you have control over is what you're doing. And as long as what you're doing is something that you're proud of and the best that you can possibly do it, the rest is not up to you. Whether you get the part, whether the producer picks up your show, whether the record label signs you, that's not up to you. All you can do is the best that you can. and be proud of what you're doing. And actually, there's a lot of freedom in that. I think I became much less stressed and angry at the world when I was like, oh, huge amounts of it aren't in my control, so that's fine. So I'm going to go out, I'm going to try, I'm going to fail, and some stuff's going to stick and some stuff isn't. But yeah, failing and realizing that actually there's a lot of freedom in not trying to control everything.
Bravo to both of you.
Well, that was good. But it was good, but he had more time to think about it.
Yes, good. Okay, Harry, now that you've had an extra 2 minutes, is there anything else?
When we send you the podcast, they're like, we'd like to cut this bit, please, and we'll keep Harry's one in there.
We'll keep that one. But Harry, I didn't have any time to think. I don't know what you're saying. I was too engrossed by your advice.
Nice.
See, I was thinking that one of you should have said, well, first off, you build a following by naming yourself after a fetish community.
Yeah.
Really pulling in them.
That's where it's at.
That's
we're
where
going to change
it's
our
at.
name after this. We're going to change our name.
We'll come up with a few ones straight after, maybe.
Yeah, come up with a really like provocative, incendiary like name that really provokes outrage, and then once you've
or something like that.
Yeah. Once you've got the following, then you just change it.
Yeah.
You'll notice, that kind of thing.
Before we finish, we always ask our guests: Is there a film you are ashamed you've never seen? We've had some real terrible answers for this, like ones they really should have seen. So this is the moment of truth.
I reckon there's loads, but the first one that comes into my head is Casablanca. I've never seen Casablanca.
Okay, good one.
Classic as well.
Good one. No.
Okay. And Harry, now that you've had a few minutes to think about your
Yeah.
Can you top him on that?
Yeah.
Can you top him on that?
I think I can. I haven't seen loads of the Star Wars movies.
Really?
Sure.
Originals, prequels,
Or quite a lot. If I've seen the Star Wars movies I've seen, I can't remember which ones they are, and I've seen sort of them in bits.
Well, Harry, you've got to watch the last one. I'm in that, mate.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Of course, I'll be watching that one. And obviously,
what do you mean you will be? What you should have watched it already.
and if you can't pick him out, then are you really a friend?
No, well, it's tough though because you're wearing. What are you wearing for that one?
He doesn't know. He hasn't seen it. He doesn't know what a stormtrooper is. You've got a lightsaber. You've all got lightsabers.
Yeah, they're all dressed in white, aren't they?
Yeah, you'll recognise me because I'm the stormtrooper with the lovely hat.
No, but obviously big fan of J.J. Abrams, and so I'll be obviously watching all of those.
Don't chuck that in.
Yeah, I was about to say, definitely a little plug.
It's too late now.
He's
too late.
invested in your play. He's already done it.
Yeah.
Forget him now. It's over.
Harry who? Excellent. And final question for me, actually. Do either of you have a favourite Mischief play?
Oh, that's good. It probably switches between...
Charlie's had ages to think of that question, so let's just take a note
easy,
on that.
easy, much easier.
Yeah,
I'm feeling very smug at the moment.
I think it was probably for me. It was probably Bank Robbery, but then I think that's just because I had the most to do in it. I was on like all the time, and it was an exhausting show. But I kind of loved jumping around and shouting for 2.5 hours. But then magic's really fun.
Do you come out of a tour of these shows like Two Stone Lighter because you're just like, I've just done so much?
Yeah, you can lose a lot of weight, particularly on like actually plays quite hard because you're wearing so much heavy, and the costumes are quite heavy, and so you're just sweating a lot. But actually, after I'd probably say like 4 or 5 weeks, you just kind of get used to it. You kind of get your match fitness back up.
Yeah, you get match fit, which is kind of a weird thing. And then you're away for like, if you take a holiday for like 4 days, then I often come back just like, oh god,
yeah, it's killer.
This is gonna
this bit again.
Yeah.
I went into Bank Robbery as like emergency cover because the guy playing my pop broke his hand, and I hadn't done it for 18 months. Had about a day rehearsal, and then I went in first day, just like absolutely smashed it, and then lost my voice, and then literally was just like, oh fuck, I can't just be from the original cast, and I've lost my voice. So I got up and I went in and I did the most gentle warm up from like 10 a.m. all the way through the day into the show in the evening, and then just my own ego got in the way, and I was like, I'm refusing to not go on. And then I was actually fine by the end of it. But like, yeah, that was just, I just completely underestimated how challenging that show was.
Fair enough. Well, from Mischief Theatre, Dave Hearn and Harry Kershaw. Thank you so much
Hold
for coming
on, Harry.
Oh,
Do you have a favourite?
oh, of course we do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I've
Sorry,
I've had a long time to think about this. So
Don't worry, we'll edit out my my mistake there. That's fine.
No, I think I think my favourite is play that goes wrong, but just because it was the first one. I think my favourite part to do is Chris Bean in Peter Pan goes wrong. But I think as a play, I think it's probably the same reason. Chris Bean runs around a lot and does a lot in play in the same way that you do in Bank Robbery. But yeah, I think it's just a really fun show. It's just a really fun, stupid show, which is great.
And Harry, have you got like a really cool sign-off line?
Dave, you've got a couple of minutes to think of yours.
Yeah.
We'll just play this all day. We'll just go back and forth.
Yeah.
Is there a bath soap that you favour?
What would a cool sign-off line be?
I don't know, just being like, like stay classy, but something.
Yeah, see, that's the only thing. As soon as you said that, that's the only thing I could think of. Stay classy, but that's not my cool sign-off line.
I think your sign-off line should be Harry Kershaw seeking representation.
There's something desperate about that.
It's true, and you're not seeking
Harry Kershaw,
representation.
desperate for recognition. Thank you.
Very good. I'll keep on the same theme. I'll go, Dave Hearn, I need your laughs. That was quite dark, actually, wasn't it?
It was quite dark.
It was the way that you leaned into the camera.
I need your laughs.
It's the doorway to a new part of your career. Like, I'm now giving up comedy.
Yeah.
We cut to a clip of Dave sat in a dark room in a chair, just rubbing his thumbs, going,
crying.
Yeah. Ollie,
bleeding.
Have you got a sign off?
Have I?
Yes.
Oh God, but you're going to have ages to think of it. Now. That's exactly the you've set up. I don't. No, I don't. I don't have one. I don't know what to say.
How do you guys usually sign off from the show?
I'm not. Well, Charlie normally interrupts me, whatever I'm saying, and then asks for like.
Oh, very good.
Just a montage.
It's dancing in slow motion. Charlie's hairy, he's Robin Williams' chest coming out. He's just gyrating. But today, unfortunately, being apart, we can't achieve that. But gentlemen, thank you very much for this is my sign off. This is my segue. Thank you for joining us. It's been fantastic. I've had a wonderful time. And Charlie,
rolling with the punches
on that bombshell.
Thanks for having us.
Rolling with the punches.
Thanks for us having you. One of the two. Ollie, we've
Yeah,
finished. Did you?
I'm still trying to think of a sign off. It's fine. It's done. It's done.